Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video we're going to talk about Rule 12, which is selling vessels. Okay, let's start with the first paragraph. A. When two vessels are approaching one another so as to involve risk of collision, one of them shall keep out of the way of the other as follows. So this sentence actually carries a lot of meaning. There's three specific parts. The first bit says that it applies when two sailing vessels approaching one another. So it doesn't apply if one of them is a motor vessel. It doesn't apply forms of fishing vessels. It will only apply if both the vessel are sailing vessels. It also says they get to be approaching so as to involve risk of collision. This means you cannot apply Rule 12 if risk of collision does not exist. So if you are in a race or in any other situation, you are just wanting somebody to keep out your way and less risk of collision naturally exists, Rule 12 can't apply. Final part, one of them should keep out of the way of the other as follows implies. It is going to define a stand-on vessels and a give-way vessel. First paragraph, when each has the wind on the different side, the vessel which has the wind on the port side shall keep out of the way of the other. Second part, when both have the wind on the same side, the vessel which is windward shall keep out of the way of the vessel which is to leeward. Third paragraph, if a vessel with the wind on the port side sees a vessel to windward and cannot determine with certainty whether the other vessel has the wind on her port or starboard side, she shall keep out of the way of the other
vessel. We've got the wind on our port side. You can see the sail hanging over the starboard side of the boat. We're sailing along quite happily. No other vessels, no risk of collision. We've got no reason to change our course or speed or do anything different. But suddenly we see another vessel. We can see they've got a sail up and no indication of them using their engine. So we can tell from this situation that there's two sailing vessels, and that's pretty much it. We've got to determine if risk of collision exists. The only way to do that is by continuing to monitor the situation. So we monitor for a little bit. We can't really tell much from that, so we have to monitor a little bit more. By now we can see that her bearing isn't really changing. We now know risk of collision exists. We can see that she's a sailing vessel, so we know we've got two sailing vessels, and we know we can see each other, so Rule 12 is going to apply. Being able to see her, we can see she's got the wind on her starboard side. Her sail is hanging over the port side of the vessel. So we've both got the wind on a different side. The vessel with the wind on her port side, which is us on the blue vessel, we must keep out of the way. So in this situation, the easiest thing to do is just going to be to come round to starboard, make a bold alteration of course so that the other vessel can see what we're doing, and then we can continue past. And we continue past until we're finally past and clear. You don't have to alter course to starboard, it's just in this situation that's probably the easiest thing to do. In this diagram again, we're going to take the wind to be coming from the north of the screen. So we'll put the wind arrow at the top. We're going to place ourselves on the small vessel at the bottom. We're on the blue vessel this time again. You can see the sail is hanging across the port side of our vessel. The wind is on our starboard side. So we're sailing along quite happily. Nobody else around, so we can continue quite easily. But we then see another vessel. We can make out she's a sailing vessel. We can see her sails up. We can even make out that she's got the wind on the starboard side. We can see that the sail is hanging over the port side of her, and we know from our position that the wind is coming from the north, so it would be pretty hard for her to have the wind coming from the other side. But in this situation, we haven't determined if risk of collision exists. The only way to do that is to continue to monitor the situation. After a little while, we've seen that the bearing between us isn't changing. We know risk of collision exists. So, what are we going to do? Well, under Rule 12, we know we've got two sailing vessels, risk of collision exists, Rule 12 applies. We know we've both got the wind on the same side, So the vessel which is to windward needs to keep out of the way. In this case the red vessel is the give-way vessel, and the blue vessel is the stand-on vessel. So the red one is going to make a bold alteration of course. We can see her coming round, we can see she's taken action. And we can continue, and she's going to pass clear astern of us. Again, she could have taken any action. She could have stopped in the water, she could have come round to starboard, or she could come round to port. And once she's clear, then we just continue on till we're finally passed in clear and no risk of collision exists. This is in a diagram again. Okay, in this diagram we're going to take the wind again from the north, and we're going to place ourselves in a vessel down here in the bottom left hand corner. This is pretty much the same as in the first example. We've got the wind on our port side, sailing along quite happily, nobody else, so we can continue. However, we then see another vessel up ahead. We can tell they're a sailing vessel, we can see they've got their sails up, but they've got a lot of sails up here, and we know that the wind is coming from astern of them, so we haven't really got much of an idea as to which side she's got her wind. We've got to determine, first of all, whether risk of collision exists. So we'll continue to monitor the situation. We can see the compass bearing hasn't appreciably changed, so we know risk of collision exists. But we've now got to determine our action. We know that rule 12 applies because we're both sailing vessels and we can see each other and risk of collision exists. So rule 12 is going to designate one of us as stand on and one of us as give way. We're sat on this red vessel. We're now thinking, if she's got the wind on her port side, that means we've got the wind on the same side, and she's to windward, so she's got to keep out of our way. And then we're thinking, hang on, what if she's got the wind on the other side? If she's got the wind on her starboard side, then I've got to now keep out of her way. And this is when the third part kicks in. We've got the wind on our port side, we see a vessel to windward, we cannot determine with certainty, so we've got to keep out of her way. In this situation, she's actually got the wind on the starboard side, so she knows full well that she has right of way. We haven't quite determined that, but under the third part, we cannot determine things with certainty, so we've got to keep out of her way. This time we're going to make a bold alteration to starboard and continue till we're finally passed and clear, and then we can continue on our way knowing risk of collision does not exist.
Paragraph B. For the purposes of this rule, the windward side shall be deemed to be the side opposite to that on which the mainsail is carried, or, in the case of the square ridge vessel, the side opposite to that on which the largest fore and aft sail is carried. So it is basically saying that we are going to define the windward side only for the purposes of this rule. It is very easy once you actually see what the mainsail is or what a large is for enough sail is. So let's have a look at some pictures to see fit for certain.
Picture, we can see we've got a simple yacht, she's got one sail up. It just so happens she's got the mainsail up. We know that because here we have the main mast, and here we have the main sail. It's hanging off the main mast, it's actually on the boom. To determine the windward side, we need to determine which side she's carrying this sail. It's actually quite hard from this angle to determine. The only thing we'd be able to go on would be that possibly this flag astern telling us the wind direction, and actually because it's right in the centre of the ship, it's very hard to tell. Let's have a look at the next image. Okay, so this image is a bit more of a classic yacht. We've got two different sails. We've got this forward sail here, but for the purposes of the rule, this sail has no impact at all. We are interested in the one astern of her mast, this one here. This is her mainsail. And we need to try and work out on what side it's carried. To me, it looks like she's carrying the mainsail on her port side, which means the wind is coming from her starboard side. You can tell just by looking at these images, it's actually very hard to tell where the wind is coming from. Let's try the next one. Okay, so in this picture we're starting to look at some square rigged sails. You've got these sails here on the mast, which are the square rigged ones. These are not to be used for trying to work out what side the wind is from. They're a very good indication, but as per the rule they don't define which is her windward side. We're looking for the largest fore and aft sail. These sails are running in a fore and aft direction. This sail in here is also running in a fore and aft direction, and this sail at the stern is running in a fore and aft direction. To me, this one looks like the largest one, so we're going to use that to determine on which side the windward side is. From this picture, it looks like that sail.
And that completes part B, which has basically just defined which side the windward side shall be in the case of normal yachts are carrying just a mainsail and square root vessels, which are loads of sails. It shows you which one you have to use to determine where the wind is coming from.